to infinity and beyond.
This is me. This is how I win.
Were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer!
You're a wizard, Harry.
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you.
No, I am your father.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the film room. Zach Goins here with Johnny Sobchak for a very thankful episode because, we just had Thanksgiving. We're thankful for all of the things that we have in our lives. We're thankful for Johnny and his birthday that just occurred. Very thankful to have him as the co-host of this podcast. Very thankful for movies, for TV, for everything that we're going to be talking about today. And we're thankful for the Fabelmans and Bones and All because that's what we're reviewing. Doubleheader coming at you. Johnny, how are you? Are you feeling old yet?
I am feeling a little old. I'm also feeling thankful as well, though, Zach. Of course, opportunity to hop on the pod with you. We've had a little break from being on here, but got plenty to talk about. We've been watching plenty of stuff. As you said, new movies, new shows. And it was my birthday as well, just a couple days ago on the 25th. I'm 26 years old now. I am feeling a little bit old, not going to lie. But I'm just keeping myself in a positive, grateful mindset. I'm trying to just push through. We got the holidays coming up. It's already in the very Christmassy zone, I would say, as far as at my house. We're putting up decorations and I've been getting ready. I'm crafting up my holiday watch list for movies and whatnot. So I'm enjoying that. And like I said, we got plenty to talk about as far as our main reviews today, and then also some other stuff we've been keeping up with. So I'm excited to talk about it.
And above all else that we are thankful for, of course, is for you, the listeners out there. We are thankful for you. We couldn't do it without you. We appreciate the support for the podcast, the website, the socials, the newsletter, all of that good stuff. Thank you so much. And Johnny, you mentioned the holiday season, and it's also screener season because that's really ramped up. I feel like compared to years past, it had been a little sparse for us in the NCFCA leading into this month. It was like mid-November, and I was like, man, I've hardly really gotten much in the mail. And then boom, like 2 days, we get like 15 screener links for digital stuff. And then we get an A24 book. We get a neon book of movies. We get, what else did we get? Amazon Prime's like little booklet of 4 movies, however many they sent. So they started flowing pretty quickly. And I woke up this morning with big intentions of making it a movie day. And so I first off, I kicked things off with Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, which I haven't seen. That came out a while ago. I know you had already seen it, but I was playing catch up there. Then very abrupt change of pace into Bones and All, very different. And then took a little break for the Panthers and going to circle back tonight for a nightcap with either Pinocchio or perhaps what else did I have on my list? I made like a priority list. I know there's too we have so many that I like prioritize. I made a priority list of like these are the ones I absolutely have to watch.
Yeah.
So Pinocchio, or if I'm feeling up for it, Tar, which I haven't seen yet.
Oh,
but
man.
The 158. It's like high on my list, but for tonight, an after dinner movie, 158 minutes is a little intimidating. We'll see what happens, but definitely going to be checking that out in the next day or two. But busy times. And what have you been watching screener wise? And then we'll get into just everything we've been watching.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, definitely echo those sentiments. I do feel like it was just a deluge of screeners, which is just like the best problem to have, of course. And super grateful to Netflix, A24, Neon, all these big companies, distributors and production companies that get the ball rolling for us and make sure that we have everything that we want to see or need to see. And as far as that's concerned, just last night, for example, and I think it was maybe on Wednesday, I believe, just before Thanksgiving, I saw you posted it. You sent a picture, and then I got my big Pinocchio box from Netflix, which was super, super cool. They included some Italian hot chocolate. There's a Pinocchio Funko Pop in there, and a making of book, which I'm excited to dive into. I just watched the movie last night and really enjoyed it. It kind of everything I expected it to be, but it was even, I'd say, more adult and maybe a little bit darker, but also like more emotional and more like imaginative in certain ways, which I won't spoil. But it was just a really, really good animated movie. I would say easily the best one I've seen so far this year. And there have been some good ones. I liked Turning Red. I liked The Bad Guys from Universal. Puss in Boots is around the corner, which I'm hearing really good things about. But this one I think is going to be pretty strongly in the lead as far as the animated films are concerned. So excited to talk more about that. But other than that, I got a screener link for Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special last week, so I got to see it a little bit.
Huge
early.
Oscars contender right there.
Huge Oscars contender, but I got to shout it out because it might be my favorite thing that I've seen in the last week or so. Super cute, super just fun, and even a little emotional, especially towards the end. It's out now, so definitely check it out on Disney Plus if you haven't seen it already. It's just a reminder of how good James Gunn is. I feel like as a creator, and especially within the MCU, he just has such a different flavor, I think, compared to everything else we usually get. So always a welcome there. And then, I got my own list. I'm trying to get on top of it. I think I had maybe 8 or 10 movies lined up before this little mini holiday break over the last week. And I saw like one of them, and that was Pinocchio. So I really got to buckle down. I'm going to really be trying over the next week or two before we get back into like the Christmas holiday window to really get these knocked out. And I have plenty of access to it on online and also physical screeners. So no excuse, but I agree that there's a lot that we got to get to. I'm sure we'll be talking about plenty of that later down the road.
For sure. And in between all that, there was still some other viewing that I had over the last week or 2 weeks, I guess, since our last podcast. But I know on the TV side, one of the things that I have been looking forward to for a whole year, basically, I saw it the first season of Sex Lives of College Girls on HBO Max. It came out last year, but I literally watched it like January 1st. And if I had watched it last year, it would have been like right up there as like one of my top 2 shows probably. But season 2 is finally back. Well, I guess not finally, it's been less than a year, but still season 2 is here, and the first 4 episodes are out. I've still only watched the first 2, but right back in the swing of things. Absolutely loving it. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do. It's by Mindy Kaling on HBO Max, and shout out to Charlotte's finest, Renee Rapp, is the leading lady on this show. So a little North Carolina represent there, but super fun. It very much like captures the like Gen Z millennial experience, rather in like an authentic way that is not like cringy when shows try and be Gen Z, but it feels very true to form of like what we experienced, and even like what younger people are now experiencing in college. But super good show, super fun. And then movie wise, like you, Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, I guess not movie but special. Enjoyed it. Didn't love it as much as you did, but I know you've always been a much higher Guardians in general fan than I have. But had some fun with that. We watched that last night. I already mentioned Marcel the Shell. On Thanksgiving night, took the family to go see Glass Onion, which you have not seen yet, have you?
I have not gotten that a chance to go peep it. So now I'm still waiting.
I'm lapping you. I've seen it twice now after Film Fest 919, and then took the family on Thanksgiving night. We're all stuffed with turkey and looking for something to do. So we went to the theater. So the 2 movie theaters near me, they both had 2 7:15 showings, 1 seat available in each of those. And then we went to a different theater a little further away and got the last 4 seats. We were in the second row, but they had recliners, so it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
But my family, my parents and my brother both, they all loved it. And it was fun to watch the second time around, knowing all of the twists and turns that are coming and seeing the breadcrumbs dropped
Yeah.
to pick up on those as everything is being hinted at. So that was a lot of fun. Fabelmans, which we'll talk about, saw that earlier this week, and I last week, I guess 2 weeks ago maybe, watched Causeway on Apple TV Plus, which was I didn't really know much about it going in, other than like Brian Tyree Henry and Jennifer Lawrence star in this movie, but was really impressed by it. It was a sleeper pick to slide into my like top 15, top 12-ish of the year, I think. So
Yeah.
really, really liked that. I would recommend anyone to check it out. A slower paced movie, but just two really fantastic performances that carry that. So it's heavy but enjoyable. So that's been me. I've been very busy the last couple of weeks with watching. So it's been a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last thing I'd actually shout out, because it's been maybe top of my mind, I would say, even compared to some of the movies that I've been seeing and that we'll be talking about here in a minute. The White Lotus on HBO. Finally got caught up. Well, let me actually reframe this real quick. I started season 2 without seeing season 1.
Interesting
Reagan,
approach.
yeah, well, Reagan, my girlfriend. Well, I knew it was mostly its own thing. Like, it's not like a full on anthology. There's some carryover from the last season, but definitely able to enjoy season 2 without seeing season 1. So if anyone's worried about that, don't be. I think we're 4 episodes in. 5th episode is on tonight as of this recording. I'm really loving it. It's so funny. It's so juicy and dramatic, and it's beautiful as well. Really well, I would say, written and shot and everything. This one's set in Sicily, and after getting all caught up last week, through the first 4 episodes for this new season, I thought, well, I feel like I need to go back and watch season 1, because I heard so many good things. It won like 10 Emmys. Or something like that. I feel like I'd be doing myself a disservice not to have the full picture. And so last week, I think earlier in the week, I binged season 1. It's only 5, I think 6 episodes maybe. And it's again very, I would say, bingeable, because it's just it's not a mystery per se, but it's just very dramatic, and you're not really sure like what's gonna happen next. And the characters are all very colorful. So I really love season 1. I'm loving season 2. Excited to finish it up over the next couple of weeks. And so yeah, definitely one of the highlights of the year for me, I would say, television wise.
I did not know that. That's interesting. I guess I was just out of the loop, but I didn't know that 2 and 1 were the 2 seasons were so isolated, because I was like, oh, everybody's talking about season 2, but I haven't seen 1, so I'll just wait until later to hop on rather than try and cram it in to catch up.
No, yeah. The main connective tissue is Jennifer Coolidge's character, who was in season 1. She's
Right.
also in season 2, but all of the other characters essentially are brand new, and it's in Sicily, whereas the first season was in Maui in Hawaii. So, the White Lotus is the name of the resort. So they have resorts all over the world. They already greenlit season 3. So, keep up, stay up for season 3, which I'm sure will come out the next couple of years. Who knows where they're going to go with that one, but just a really fun show. So definitely recommend that as well.
Well, Johnny, shall we get into our doubleheader today?
Let's do it.
Alrighty, first up, The Fabelmans. Now, this is going to be just me talking about it. I got to check out a screening earlier in last week ahead of Thanksgiving. Johnny has yet to see it, but we'll be seeing it soon, hopefully, once Universal starts sending around some screening links, some physical screeners. But for now, it'll be just me, and Johnny's going to toss in some questions here and then, really just share some thoughts. So this is the latest movie from Steven Spielberg, inspired by his own childhood. Been getting a lot of hype ever since it was first announced. The cast trickled out. We've got Paul Dano in there, Michelle Williams, Seth Rogen, Gabriel LaBelle plays Sammy Fabelman, the main character, who is inspired by a young Steven Spielberg. Then Jeannie Berlin is in here, and Julia Butters, our superstar from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and The Gray Man, the cinematic masterpiece. So it was, back in the day, you were very excited about it. Our friend Josh was very excited about it. Jake, obviously. because of just Steven Spielberg being such an icon, and then when you hear that he's doing, a retrospective look at himself, at his career with movies, at his childhood, that it's obviously going to be like this powerful personal film for him. I remember being very excited about it, and we're finally here. We are finally here. Quick rundown here. Rotten Tomatoes, 93% critic score, 81% audience score. I'm right in there between the two with an 83 out of 100. And a little plot here. Young Sammy Fabelman falls in love with movies after his parents take him to see the greatest show on earth. Armed with a camera, Sammy starts to make his own films at home, much to the delight of his supportive mother. Sounds sweet, sounds tender. It absolutely is. No, I really, really enjoyed this movie. It was a lot of fun, a lot of, like I said, sweet, tender moments. It balanced the, sometimes I feel like you can get with these movies where it's like first of all, there's like the love letter to movies sort of moniker that people throw on movies like this.
Yeah.
And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's like overly sweet, like Hollywood just patting itself on the back. And loses its heart, but that was not the case here. And then you also have like on the other side, not only just a love letter to movies, but like a director with a movie about themselves, inspired by their own childhood. That can, either be a great hit or become like too conflated with the director's own personal feelings and not end up being as good as it could have been. But I think with both categories, this movie walked the perfect balance between both and was able to have great success. And I also thought that it balanced all of the different emotional tones really well. This is like in between the story of Sammy discovering movie making and making his own films and growing up. There's a ton of drama around in his family. His parents' relationship is not perfect. He's having to help support his two sisters, and they're moving all around the country due to his dad's work and trying to fit in at high school and be a regular kid. So there's a lot of dramatic elements as well, rather than just like him making movies. And so it really handled those poignantly, while also still balancing in like plenty of humor, plenty of lightheartedness. So it never felt like either overly comedic or overly dramatic and a downer of a movie, but instead it really bounced back and forth and was able to have a good blend there. So that for me, I feel like that's where it could have lost me if it was too heavy and too dramatic rather than the balance that it did have. So that was reassuring for me. But I thought, let's see what else. I thought that the actor who played Sammy, Gabriel LaBelle, was fantastic. He was so charismatic, very charming in this like sort of nerdy outcast way that still like you as watching him as the main character have this strong connection to him, but you can totally see him as being like, this is back in the day. And it's like the classic, like the jocks or the cool guys at school and the cheerleaders and all that. And this like kind of nerdy kid on the outskirts that carries his camera around. So that was a very fun character to connect with and follow around. I thought that Gabriel LaBelle was fantastic, showing that like, being introverted, but also coming out of his shell when the time came. Michelle Williams as his mother, really, really solid performance there. She kind of goes through, without getting into, I don't know what's spoiler, what's not, but she has a very wide range of emotions that she goes through with her affections for her son, with her disputes with her husband, and just trying to like figure out who she is and what she wants. So really stellar performance there. Not as much. I get Paul Dano is great. It's definitely Michelle Williams and Gabriel LaBelle's movie. He's more like secondary character, Seth Rogen tertiary character. But they're both excellent in what they do, like when they are on screen, the scenes that they do share. So really, I feel like really nothing too wrong with this movie. I thought it could have been tightened down a little bit. Maybe that's part of the, like I was saying earlier, like this is Steven Spielberg talking about himself. Like maybe another director telling this story would have trimmed it down a little bit, but because he's like, oh, this is my story, I deserve however long I want to tell this story, probably let it slide. But it wasn't ever to the point of like, oh, this is overly long, it's exhausting, I'm ready to be done. But really enjoyed it, Johnny. I'm going to turn it over to you in case you have questions about it or just thoughts that from trailers and expectations for it, and we can discuss.
Yeah, so well, I'm gonna come in at first. It sounds like I'm glad that you liked it so much, because I feel like that's a good indicator. I mean, you, Jake, and Josh in our group, they've all been very high on it. So I think that I'm optimistic that I'm really gonna like it. Because I'm not sure, as you said, it is a personal kind of like semi-autobiographical story, and it seems like it could be a little schmaltzy or like overly sentimental or maybe too specific because it's such a personal story, but it sounds like it's going to be pretty enjoyable and just overall like not really falling into that trap. So that's good. So let me think of it first off from like an awards perspective, because I'm curious as like the awards person on our team. Like, would you say that without everything being considered right now, this is basically, people are talking about this being a top 1 or top 2 best picture contender? I guess I would ask, like, what do you think about that? And like, would you predict that, or would you say that is like, would you be fine if this won best picture? Because I know some people are like, oh no, not like Spielberg winning again or something like that. But I'm just kind of curious what you're feeling about that right now.
Let's see. I mean, I feel like I would definitely be okay with this winning best picture. It's not my personal favorite movie of the year or best movie of the year. But I feel like it's hard because like had this been 5 years ago, 6 years ago, like I would say probably it's like a lock, just because of like, like I said earlier, like the movies about Hollywood always do well, and like Hollywood loves seeing movies about movie making and all of this stuff, that like they're going to reward their own. And obviously, like coming from a prestigious director like Steven Spielberg, it's got the pedigree. But I would not be upset if this does win. I think there are better things out there, more bolder choices out there, but I could totally see it going this way, and I would not be opposed to it.
Okay.
It's not your Everything Everywhere All at Once, just absolutely bonkers pick that, I'm on board with that as well. But this is a much safer bet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's kind of similar with what I'm thinking, at least at this point, having not seen it. One other thing that I was curious about, and I don't think you mentioned it so far, and I've heard multiple different takes on this, just on Twitter and whatnot. John Williams, of course, greatest composer of all time, obviously scored this as well. He's been with Spielberg for decades now. Is this, I imagine it'll be nominated, could potentially be competing to win. Like, did the score stand out to you at all? Was it like great, or did you think it was just like good, or was it kind of underwhelming, would you say? Because I've seen kind of every take in that vein.
Like thinking back on it now, it's been almost a week since I saw it. Hasn't really stuck with me, the score. I can't remember particular moments like in the film where I was like, oh, this is really fantastic. Which, like with a guy like John Williams, you've got such like when you say his name, you've got like Jurassic Park, Harry Potter, Star Wars, like all of these like iconic ones. Fabelmans isn't going to be up there in that discussion. Indiana Jones, forgot about that. Like
Jaws.
Jaws. A ton of Spielberg movies. But this is not going to be, at least as far as I'm concerned, this isn't like in the legendary rotation with those other titles. But no complaints about the score, but just nothing that really like stuck with me.
Okay, gotcha. And then maybe at least one or two other things I'm curious about. Paul Dano, I know you said he's really a secondary character, more supporting. He's never been nominated for an Oscar. I've been predicting all season that he would finally get nominated. It seems like people are mostly coming around to that, but it sounds like maybe his role wasn't quite as big or as impactful enough to like garner that nomination. And then also Judd Hirsch, I know he shows up for
Mhm.
basically one scene, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and kind of steals the show and like really has a great like kind of standout moment. How do you feel? Do you think it's possible that they could both get in? Do you think Dano is maybe a little underwhelming and could risk missing out? And could Hirsch potentially replace him and get in as well, just based on one scene alone?
I that would be I feel like Paul Dano, like I didn't mean to come across the wrong way. When he's on screen, like he is excellent. It's just the quantity of his
Yeah.
scenes are not like as much as in regard to this movie being like Michelle Williams and Gabriel LaBelle. Like those are like
Yeah.
your two like go-to leads. Um, but I think for what he's given, he crushes it. The Judd Hirsch, he's also really fun in his, like you said, one scene, two scenes maybe. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's enough to garner I would not say to garner a win, maybe a nomination, but if I
Yeah.
had to pick between Paul Dano and Judd Hirsch to nominate one, I would go Paul Dano, but I would also go Paul Dano in the Batman over in this. Um, but
Yeah,
fun fact, funny
that's funny you
story.
mentioned that because I saw someone say like I think Paul Dano's better in the Batman than he is in Fabelmans, and I think I still have Dano in my top 5 supporting actors right now. That may not
Mhm.
be the same at the end of the year, but it wouldn't surprise me if even after I see the Fabelmans, I'm like, I'm gonna keep Dano for Batman instead. But
Right.
uh,
Personally, I think that that's the better performance. He obviously had, based on what I'm telling you now, he had much more to do in that movie with his role than he did here. But again, when he is on screen here, he is fantastic. But funny story, I knew so Judd Hirsch going in, um, for some reason I was just like blanking, and I knew Judd Hirsch was in this movie, but I was picturing Jude Hill, the child from Belfast last year, and I kept waiting on him to show up. And I was like, wait, was he like the
yeah,
young Sammy at the very beginning? I was like, no, that was not him, was it? And then like finally afterwards, I was like, wrong guy, wrong name, not quite. Close, but not quite.
that's good. Yeah, yeah,
But
close, close, close. Okay,
well,
wait, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, so one last thing I'll ask you about, and then you can wrap up with any other thoughts or comments you have. And maybe you won't have much to say about this, but without spoiling, I've heard like a lot of different takes just saying that like the ending or like the last scene or last shot is just like so great and like so perfectly Spielberg and like really is the cherry on top. So I'm like really excited about that. And I have some inkling of like what it's about or what it's going to be like, but I was curious how you felt. I mean, I feel like endings are always something we talk about in movies, and if you nail it, you like it's can do a lot for the movie. I was curious if that stuck out to you at all as like a particularly like great scene or like great moment of the movie, or if it was just something that you thought was like solid or good.
Yeah. Um, I can totally see why Josh in particular freaked out with this last sequence. There is a cameo in like the last scene, and then the closing shot directly plays into like a joke, a moment in that previous scene. Um, so it's fun. It's like a
Okay.
fun nod to movie making. It wasn't like for
Yeah.
someone like Josh or even like Jake, like I can totally see them like going nuts over it. For me, it was fun. It was a good ending, but it wasn't like anything because I don't have that connection, like as strong of a connection to like filmmaking as
Yeah.
rather than just like a film consumer. Um, but it's fun. It's cute.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, that's what I figured. So I'm looking forward to that.
yes, you need to check it out. We can circle back to the Fablemans once you finally get the chance to see it. It's a lot of fun.
Hmm.
Good movie. Very, very sweet and sentimental, but also has a lot to say without being overly sweet. So 83 out of 100 for me. And Johnny will let us know his score when the time comes. But switching, just like I switched from Marcel the Shell over this morning, we're now switching from the Fablemans To Bones and All, a very, very different movie. Johnny, as the Timothy Chalamet stan in the podcast, I'm going to turn this one over to you to set the stage for us.
Sounds good. And have you seen Guadagnino's last two
I
films?
have not seen, no, I have not seen Suspiria or Call Me by Your Name. So this is my first Guadagnino experience.
Okay, gotcha. I would definitely be curious to hear your thoughts on those. But yes, this is Luca Guadagnino's of his recent films, Call Me by Your Name in 2017, Suspiria in 2018. This is his third film in that kind of grouping. And I liked both of those movies a lot. I think they were both pretty much great across the board for each of those in very different ways. Call Me by Your Name, obviously very tender and coming of age kind of romance. And then this is or Suspiria rather was a horror remake, obviously totally different setting, totally different tone, visual aesthetic, and everything else. And I guess Bones and All is almost maybe a natural progression, almost combination of those two concepts. It's a coming of age story. It's set in the 80s, just like Call Me by Your Name was, but it is a horror film for all intents and purposes because it is focused on two cannibals and the kind of their first love. So we have Marin, played by Taylor Russell, who some of you may know from Waves, which is what I know her from previously. And she's a young woman who's learning how to survive on the margins of society. And she meets Lee, played by Timothy Chalamet, who is an intense and disenfranchised drifter. And basically the movie, once they meet up, is a liberating road odyssey of two young people coming into their own, searching for identity and chasing beauty in a perilous world that cannot abide who they are. Along with those two, it's a really good supporting cast. They don't have major like roles, I would say, for the most part, outside of Mark Rylance, who plays Sully in the movie, who we'll be talking about, I'm sure, throughout the review. Michael Stuhlbarg also appears. He plays Chalamet's dad in Call Me by Your Name, which people will remember. Of course, he's always a reliable actor there. Andre Holland plays Taylor Russell's character, Marin's father. And then Chloe Sevigny, David Gordon Green, Jessica Harper, and Jake Horowitz. So all good actors, all pretty recognizable faces and names, especially in the more art house, like indie film circuit. Chloe Sevigny, of course, has been around for years. Andre Holland, Michael Stuhlbarg. So this was a movie I'd been looking forward to pretty considerably. As you mentioned, I'm the resident Chalamet fan and big admirer of his work, especially coming off of Dune. This is his next role. Don't Look Now also came out last year, so he's on a hot streak. And then Taylor Russell, I really liked her in Waves. I thought she wasn't even necessarily a breakout role because I feel like she didn't get a whole lot of recognition for it, but I thought she kind of stole the show in some ways in that movie. And so I was excited to see her again. And then I thought the combination of those two, and then of course the supporting cast kind of around them, I thought was going to be a fun opportunity. And then Guadagnino, as I mentioned, I liked his previous two movies. I would say this movie, of the three, I haven't seen the other two in a while, especially Call Me by Your Name. I haven't seen since it came out in theaters. I would say this is probably my third favorite of those three. But I still liked it. I thought it was really good, really solid. And but again, very different, and it kind of takes a little time, I think, adjusting to just the tone and the feel of this movie, because I don't know about you, Zach, but I haven't seen any cannibal love story movies in my recollection that I can think of right now.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because not necessarily, it starts as a love story and then takes a very different twist than this, but Fresh from earlier this year,
yes.
with Sebastian Stan and Daisy Edgar Jones, was a love story that twists into a cannibal story. So what a year for the cannibal on the big screen.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It just came to my mind as well when you were saying that. So, but yeah, and I haven't seen Fresh, so this is whole new ground for me, Zach. And I was a little nervous about how they were going to balance that, I think, tonally. And then also you have to consider, the gore elements of that, like how violent is the movie going to be? And then how's the romance going to be depicted? And I think overall for me, like, I felt like it did a pretty good job balancing both of those. the movie is like very much meandering. It is like a road trip kind of movie in some ways. It just takes place across different swaths of the United States, and the supporting cast are basically folks that they run into along the way for the most part, and it I think overall more than anything is an acting showcase and gives Russell and Chalamet and Rylance and the others like just pretty interesting, unique scenarios and scenes to work off of. And I think that's like was my biggest takeaway from it, and like why I ultimately came out feeling positive on it, even though I wasn't like elated. And it had been in my maybe top 5 most anticipated for the last few months, I think, since it premiered at Venice back in September. And it was not up to that level, I would say, of my expectations, but not really a disappointment either, I wouldn't say. But I know you felt maybe similarly, but maybe a little bit more down on it than I was.
I feel like I definitely liked this movie. I gave it a 3 out of 5. It was probably like right around like a 60-ish. So similar score to what you gave. I think I went 61. But I agree with a lot of what you said. Like first and foremost is an acting showcase, with just like Taylor Russell, Timothy Chalamet, Mark Rylance having a lot to chew on, if you will, a little cannibal pun. But I feel like for me, the biggest thing that was like detracting for this movie was what you said about like the road movie of like just meandering. Like it very much felt like it was just like a different, it sounds silly to like put it this way, but it's like just different, like different sequences of events that occur, and then we go to another place, and then like different things. Like it was very meandering is the perfect word for it, rather than like, okay,
Yeah.
like we're getting from point A to point B, and here's the narrative, and like the beginning, middle, end. It was like there were a couple different times where I thought that the movie, if it hadn't been for like I was watching the screener rather than in theaters, if it hadn't been for like the time bar at the bottom of the screen, I thought it was about to end. And then like we had a whole other chapter essentially. But no, I thought it was interesting the way that they, like you said, they were balancing the love story and the horror and the gore of the cannibalism. I feel like it was tasteful, not tasteful. That's another pun. But like, with the exception of maybe there's plenty of gore still, but it wasn't like overly gory.
I
To the
agree.
point of like making me nauseous or like anything like that. Except like I feel like the worst part is that very first sequence, when Taylor Russell's at the sleepover and she bites her friend's finger, and you like see the skin pull back off the bone. But other than that, it's like it cuts, like things start and then it cuts away, or like it's like the remnants of it rather than like full on like flesh eating. The concept of it is very nauseating still, but like the actual like what you see isn't too bad. But so I thought that was handled well. I'm trying to think what else. I liked I thought Taylor Russell and Timothy Chalamet together had really good chemistry, and played off of each other well. And then I know you mentioned it that we would talk about Mark Rylance as Sully, but without doing a ton, like an absolutely terrifying, he's just like a creepy, horrifying character in this movie.
Yeah, no, I think that's entirely accurate. And I saw people, again, it's been out as far as it premiering, it's been a couple months now, or more than a couple months, and I saw a lot of people highlighting Rylance as like a standout, supporting, and just being kind of unforgettable, very unsettling, very kind of horrifying. And I do think it's interesting because without like really spoiling the movie, like they do send him through an arc of sorts, and that is, I think that's what makes the character like the most interesting and like the most effective, is that there is kind of a dynamism to that character where he's not just a one note necessarily. And it keeps you kind of on your toes, and it makes it even more unsettling and startling when things happen. So I thought he was great, and definitely like super unconventional, like not against, maybe even against type role, I would say. I don't think I've seen him in anything where he was playing like a creepy guy or like almost like an antagonistic sort of figure. Um, or like just like a dangerous person, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think that was, he usually is like more goofy or like lighthearted or just like a straight man. So I thought that was I think that was just a fun decision. Um, and I think that he ate it up. I mean, what can you
Ha ha
say
ha.
other than make another pun? And I think I liked especially his dynamic and his chemistry as far as on screen was mostly in connection with Taylor Russell, and I thought that they were a good match. I thought that they played off each other pretty well. And so yeah, I think Mike Garland's, I think right now I probably would have him in my top 5 supporting wise. I have to go and refine everything. I try to keep up with it as much as I can, but he's certainly in the conversation. Even though again, I wasn't like in love with the movie, I thought he was, a standout. And as far as speaking of chemistry on screen, dynamic and everything, the movie really is, it's Taylor Russell's movie through and through, but the central relationship and dynamic is of course between her and Chalamet as Lee. And so, I'm a Chalamet fan, Stan, as you mentioned earlier. I'm curious as someone who is maybe less enthusiastic or less high on that. What did you think about them together, as well as like they're just natural chemistry maybe, but then also like how their relationship was written and how it was ultimately kind of developed?
I definitely liked as actors. I thought they were fantastic together. They played off each other really well. I agree with you that it was very much Taylor Russell's movie. I think it was probably like 40-ish minutes in before Chalamet comes into the picture, maybe 35. But I liked the back and forth between their characters where it's like, okay, like we have this instant attraction and connection to each other just because of our shared life as eaters.
Yeah.
And then sort of like the hesitancy of like, can we trust each other? Mainly from her perspective. Like, can I
Yeah.
trust him? We go about things very differently, and like he's very out and about with his lifestyle, and she's been having to hide and hold everything back for her whole life, basically. So it was a nice foil between the two of them as they kind of learned how to live with each other and which lifestyle they would have moving forward. And then like we kind of get the separation, and without I don't want to spoil anything or get too far into the details, but I liked where they ended up, we'll say, to as far as their relationship and
Agreed.
the arc for the characters.
Agreed. Yeah.
But like I was saying, talking about endings, there's the sequence. Again, I'm gonna try and be vague to avoid spoilers, but there's a sequence like very like picturesque, like landscapes, the West, maybe like Montana or something. I don't know, like not Montana. I don't think that was one of the states that they went to. But anyway, the opening of the movie is like those paintings. It like goes through like 5 or 6 paintings that are like hanging on the wall at the school that Taylor Russell's at, and then it circles back with like real life like landscapes like that. And I was like, okay, this is the ending. Like it's like, and we have like a discussion, and there's literally like a very like perfectly like wrapping up this movie like line, and it like cuts to black, and then we have like another like 25 minutes afterwards, and like if it had ended, it would have been a much happier ending the way that I wanted it to end rather than what unfolds over the last 25 minutes. It takes quite the turn.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know. It's based on a book. I don't know if we've mentioned that. I haven't read the book, not familiar with the story. I don't know how faithful or if they've made any changes. I definitely hear what you're saying, and I do think that was. I will say, with the last shot of the movie, they do kind of maintain that parallel or that mirroring, if you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I think that's a great point that I didn't think about, is that kind of parallel and the kind of circle that they do there with the just the natural kind of wonder. And I don't know if anyone's seen, I'm a big Terrence Malick fan. Some people I'm sure listening have seen Days of Heaven and also Badlands by Terrence Malick, his first couple of films. They're also set kind of maybe not even out in the Western United States, but like Midwest and West. And very beautiful. Definitely can see inspiration from those movies in this movie. I'd say overall, just while we're touching on that, like I thought the cinematography was really great. I thought it was very naturalistic, very gritty, very filmic. Has that 80s aesthetic to it, which I thought was maintained really well. And then also in these scenes, particularly these landscape scenes and these more romantic, grand vista-like locations, I think Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross as their score, I thought
the score was good.
Yeah, I thought the score was very good. I thought it was definitely one of my top 10, I would say, of all the scores I've heard this year. Not one of their, I would say, like one of their all-time great scores that I've heard from them, but they are very talented and very they're very dynamic and versatile when it comes to their score, so it's kind of hard to compare. Like I know they just won an Oscar for Soul a couple of years ago, and this could not be further from Soul.
Right.
But I think I think that worked well, and there's almost like it's a romantic kind of almost like fairy tale kind of quality to the music, which plays well. And I think you're right. The actual dynamic between Chalamet and Russell, and you've seen it, I think if people have seen it online, like their interviews and their being together on social media and whatnot, like you can tell they have a very natural chemistry. And I think that works to like really good effect as far as the characters go. And so I think that that may have been something where I was a little bit maybe even more high on it than you were, but yeah, it does go a certain direction in the movie, and I think people are that may lose some people, and they may leave the movie feeling maybe more negatively than they would if it ended a little bit earlier, if they went a slightly different route with it. And so I'm curious, like I think you're definitely making like a fair point there. But I also appreciate like there is kind of I don't know. It is a sad movie. Like, because ultimately this whole,
and I mean, I would not expect like a movie about cannibals and their romance. You know, I wouldn't necessarily expect it to have a happy ending. So I feel like that's wishful thinking for me to be like, okay, let's end it right here. Have a nice little like happy romance. They lived happily ever after. Like that's it. The end.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would have necessarily been like true to the movie that they had just played out to end it that way. So
played out. Yeah.
So I think the ending
also,
is
that's a great,
even though it wasn't happy, I think it was just fine.
It's justified. And I think it also, we haven't really touched on this so much, but they very much play the whole Eaters group as, you know, kind of, I mean, it's supposed to, you know, I mentioned earlier in the synopsis that, you know, they're kind of disenfranchised and they're living on like the fringes of society. I think you can definitely see the parallels between, it's an analogy for like, or like metaphor for an addiction, obviously. Mm-hmm. You know, they can't help what they're doing, but they go to great lengths to do it. There's, you know, they trade sex to get what they want. They put themselves in very risky situations, for, you know, physically to get what they want. And so, and they take advantage of people. Obviously, it's just, it's a really sad like existence. And I think Guadagnino does a good job of capturing that, I think. And just how like the desperation as well, and like what happens to someone when they have to live this way for a long time. And so I think that was handled well. And I think Guadagnino, just based on the 3 films of his that I've seen now, he's not one for happy endings necessarily, or like just like happy films in general, like, but where they end up going. But and yeah, I think it was earned or like deserved and like made sense. So I agree with you there. And I'm curious though, I'm excited to see, you know, I'm sure you're probably looking forward to this as well, but there's going to be his next film coming out next year, Challengers, with Zendaya and Mike Feist. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that, because it sounds like it's going to be a little bit of a different tempo and like a change of pace for Guadagnino. And so I think it'll be an interesting, just thinking down the line of like the contrast and maybe what he's going to be wanting to do creatively next. I know Chalamet mentioned they're already talking about doing a third movie together. That would be something very different or totally a change up from either this or Call Me by Your Name. So that's exciting. But yeah, I think the one, like, I know, like I said, I didn't think it was amazing. I didn't love it. I think my biggest negative overall, and then maybe you can speak to this more yourself, is it's a little, I don't know. I think I was just talking about addiction, right? And like that metaphor. I'm wondering if, and again, I don't know the source material. I'm just wondering if there could have been more like meat on the bone there, or maybe more in-depth examination of that. Like that was not on purpose, I swear to God. But I think that there could have been a more in-depth examination of some of those things, and more like, I guess, density to some of those explorations and the characters themselves. Like, I think overall there is a little bit of maybe like, it's a road trip movie, so this is kind of a pun as well, but just like wheel spinning in some regards. Like, it's a very, like we said, meandering movie. And so I don't know if maybe a tighter edit would have helped benefit the movie, or if maybe even keeping the length but adding in maybe a couple additional scenes that do more to add to the characters, or add to certain themes that maybe Guadagnino was trying to explore or highlight. I just think the movie feels ultimately just a little too slight to me, is maybe a good way to describe it. It just feels a little too broad in some instances, even though like cannibalism, obviously very specific mode to be in horror wise and like love story wise. I think that ultimately I walked away just feeling like, okay, like that was, like, I love the performances. I thought it looked great, sounded great. But I don't know, again, like you mentioned, I don't know if it's going to stick with me in the same way that even Suspiria did, which I really liked Suspiria when I saw it, and I've seen that since theaters. I've watched it again. I'm not going to be rushing back to watch this one, or it's not going to be something where I'm going to be like, oh, you should really see that, or like, you got to watch this. It just didn't have like the same impact, I would say, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I feel like I said earlier, the meandering aspect of it was kind of what held it back for me. And then I feel like I agree with you. It could have been, if I would have enjoyed it more if it had been like a more tighter, straightforward narrative, rather than just like,
Yeah.
we're going here, we're going there, we're going here, we're going there.
Yeah,
But
agreed.
because there was like the overarching theme of like Taylor Russell's character like trying to reckon with, like, trying to figure out like how to live like this, and where it came from and how she can move forward and all of that. But going back to what you said about like the examination of like the cannibalism and the eaters as a whole, I agree. I think that Taylor Russell's character is really the only one that is like trying to reckon with like what she is and what she does. Like, she's the one who is the only one who like realizes like, we shouldn't be killing people. We shouldn't be like, how do I satiate my needs while also like abiding by the law and not murdering people? Meanwhile, everybody else that we meet is just like, okay, I can lure people and kill them. I can just take anything that I can get. They don't really seem to play by any rules. So I feel like it would have been better to see either them like reckon with it like she is, or like question more, like more questioning of like how they're able to live like this and live with themselves. I know we get some of that at the end, when we hear like more of Lee's backstory and like how he was like suicidal because of like what he is and what he does, and then he kind of
was the best scene of the movie to me.
I agree for sure.
So, and that's not just a Chalamet stand in me talking. I mean, he's great in that scene, but I think even more so, it's like it's a buildup, right? And we're talking about narrative and structure and pacing and everything. And I think that moment was so earned, and it did feel like a great release. And I think that's why that one stuck out. And it's also very, it's just dark. It's just dark and upsetting, but I think it's played and directed so well, and just, I think if you just end the movie there, it's like, oh wow, like it's definitely a more hopeful maybe or like optimistic, but it's I think it's even more mixed though, because okay, this guy ate his dad and like he like went through this whole situation where he had to kind of let himself give in to his like instincts or like his addiction as an eater.
Mhm.
And I think that was I think that was kind of what the movie needed more of, is like a little bit more. I think that monologue was so strong and was such a good like telling of that story. I wish there had been like just more of that, like those types of scenes in the movie. Um, and I think that maybe that's a whole different movie entirely if you kind of change it up like that. But I don't know. I think that just some more of that. I don't have to do away with all of the meandering kind of road trip moments and kind of just random sightings and like crossing paths, but I think that scene was just a highlight of like what worked so well about the movie, but also like what I almost like needed more of. And Russell also like just her with Chalamet in that scene was great, and just kind of the aftermath I think works. But yeah, and also I will say to the credit of the movie, like I think maybe the second best scene, or one that's other really good scenes for me as far as being effective and like not even being satisfying necessarily, but just making sense and being done well, I think, was the actual ending of the movie. And like where it goes, because it's it makes sense, I think, ultimately for what the movie's like trying to say or go for. Even if, the way you feel about watching it necessarily may not necessarily line up all the way.
I agree. I'm with you. I feel like this was just like a very, very solid 3 out of 5 for me. I feel like that's the perfect descriptor of it. I feel like going into this, I was hoping for more of a 4.5, but here we are at a 3. I think it had potential to be a 4, but
Yeah.
I still definitely enjoyed it. I still had a good time with it, but
Yeah.
just wasn't everything that I feel like it could have been.
Respect.
Respect, Luca, Taylor, Timothy. We'll
Facts.
see.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. 61 for me, 65 for Johnny. The Fabelmans and Bones and All are in the books. We'll have to, well, I guess not in the books yet until Johnny gives his official Fabelmans feedback once we get him to see it. But that's our episode. That is all we have today. Thank you all for listening, for tuning in week and week out. We appreciate all of the support here on social, everywhere that you support Inside the Film Room. Thank you.
Absolutely. Echo that 100%. And to stay tuned, to keep up with us, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. Keep up with all the podcast episodes and all the extra content, articles. Word season's heating up, as we mentioned. So stay tuned. We're going to have plenty more reviews and conversations about that going forward. So you can find those accounts all at Inside Film Room.
And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube. And be sure to subscribe to our newsletter as well. Stay tuned for all the latest giveaways and news and reviews from us. And be sure to come back next week. We will see you then.